Warzone 3 has now been with us for a little over a month, and we already have an established meta. This got me thinking about all the previous metas we've seen in Warzone. We've had some beloved, balanced, and very fun metas, and then there's the vile metas everyone hated. So today I wanted to share with you guys every single Warzone meta from launch to present day. A quick disclaimer, I'm not going to go through every single gun that was in the meta. I'm more so breaking down eras of the game. That being said, some guns are going to be missed, but I just wanted to talk about the guns that you had to be using if you wanted to compete. Starting with the launch of the game, where for the first couple of months of the game, we had the M4, the HDR and AX50 with thermal, the Grau 556, RPG, Kar 98, MP5. Pretty sure I've said it a million times on the channel, but when I think of the pandemic, I immediately think of Warzone, but more specifically, this state of the game. The M4 was a very dependable and forgiving gun that anyone could use, and to this day remains a viable choice. Then you had a few different choices for snipers, which we haven't seen in Warzone since. Mine, and just about everyone's favorite, was the Kar 98K. It was super quick, had little bullet drop off, and one shot to the head still. If tactical long-range sniping was more your thing, you could use the HDR or AX50 with the thermal sight, which just seemed to be a laser at launch. Also, the body damage was insane, which allowed you to one-shot players who weren't even fully plated without a headshot. Then there was the Grau. I think everyone can agree that this was everyone's favorite meta AR. Throwing on the Archangel barrel, you have this beautiful iron sight that allowed you to forego any optic, enabling you to kit this out to be an absolute laser. Not to mention, it's still pretty damn good today. I've seen people make videos about using this in Warzone Pacific and still dominating. There's even a couple of weirdos who would run a double Grau class where they would have the one long range kitted out, but for your other one, you turn into a nutty SMG that somehow also worked. However, if you weren't an absolute psychopath, you would pair this with the MP5, which would also be a viable option for the rest of this game's life cycle. But if you're a no good piece of shit like me, you paired this with an RPG that made for a great close range substitute because the one-shot radius on this thing was broken. Not to mention the vehicle destruction was awesome. A quick honorable mention goes out to the snake shots. Although they were very broken and possibly the most broken version of a shotgun Warzone has ever seen, they weren't near as viable because this is before Rebirth Island or Resurgence in general had been released, and Verdansk being a long-range map, it wasn't near as common that you were super close like that in this state of the game. A couple of nerfs and patches later, and that brings you to the meta just before the Cold War integration, where we saw guns such as the Origin 12 shotgun, the R9 shotgun, the AS Val, the M13, the Kilo 141, and most notably, the Bruin LMG. Not much to say about the shotguns other than they were pretty broken with the Dragon's Breath rounds, and honestly, just not fun to play against. The AS Val had this bug with this bullet penetration that allowed you to shoot through the entire map, and that is not an exaggeration.
Down one.
But even after they fixed the bullet penetration, it was still a really good gun. Honestly, it was perfect to run with a sniper, specifically the Kar 98K, because it acted as like a SMG AR hybrid thing. Now, I want to go ahead and lump the Kilo and the M13 together because they acted very similar to me. They were both very accurate, but didn't deal the most damage, so you really had to hit your shots. A nice feature about the Kilo is that if you were an absolute sick bastard, you could throw on the monkey nuts on this John and treat it pretty much just like an LMG. But throughout all this chaos, during the state of the game, the absolute most broken gun at the time was the Bruin. This was another one of those can't beat him, join him situations, since this gun was leaps and bounds ahead of everything else at the time. Nerfs eventually made this thing unusable, which I think everyone was happy with. Now we have the Cold War integration era, which is also about the same time when Rebirth Island got introduced, which not only changed how the game was played, but obviously added way too many weapons into the mix. However, right after Cold War came out, the dominant ones were the FFAR, the Akimbo Diamatis, the MAC-10, and most notably, the DMR. Aside from the FFAR, this may have been my least favorite state of the game. For starters, making all the Cold War guns meta is a shameless attempt to get people to buy the game, but aside from that, the DMR MAC-10 combo was ridiculous. The DMR could shoot as fast as you could finger blast the trigger, and the MAC-10 had no recoil, a lot of damage, and a massive magazine. Absolutely no reason to not use this SMG. However, if the MAC-10 didn't do it for you, you still had the Akimbo Diamatis, which were a 3-round burst killing machine. Insane accuracy, a decent mag size, and crazy damage made this thing very, very unfun to play against. However, there was a little glimpse of light during this dark meta with the FFAR. This FAMAS-like AR was a laser that was also really good at close range and was a perfect gun to run with the sniper. Also have a universally loved iron sight. This was another fan favorite gun, I think. Now that Cold War had been out for a couple months, a new update to Modern Warfare 2019 would bring in a brand new gun known as the AMAX. This dominated this state of the game, but there were still other viable options such as the FARA. We even had a short period of time where we saw a burst meta with the Cold War M16 and the AUG. And to round things off, another broken pistol, which you could pretty much use as an SMG because of its insane movement and its 80-round drum magazine known as the Psycom. Overall, not the worst meta since the AMAX was very good, but actually required some recoil control by the player, which made it a high-risk, high-reward gun. And although the burst meta was broken and extremely annoying, it didn't last long since it got hit with nerfs pretty fast. Now we're at the time frame of about late spring of 2021 to the release of Vanguard, and here's where things get out of control with just an absolute hodgepodge of guns in that range. We have the MG82, Swiss K3, OTS-9, the Bullfrog randomly, XM4, Krieg 6, Cold War AK-47, and Cold War MP5. Honestly, I would say there's only a few guns worth breaking down here. The first being the MG82, which had absolutely no recoil and a high capacity for its magazine. This made it a lot of fun to use and made big team wipes at range easier than ever. Then you had the Swiss K3, which was just as good, if not better, than the Kar 98 and made for a great substitute. It was honestly a lot of fun having two really good bolt-action marksman rifles to choose from at the time. Then there was the XM4, which I'm pretty sure remained relevant for the rest of the game's life cycle. It was pretty much the M4 for Modern Warfare 2019, but just the Cold War version. Not much to say about this meta other than the Swiss K being introduced was the most important thing going on here. Now we have the Vanguard Merge, which completely changed the entire game. The Vanguard guns, obviously we know, supported 10 attachments and pretty much all of them were broken. I know a lot of people loved this state of the game, but me personally, I could not stand it. The meta-defining guns at the time were the MP40, the Owen gun, the Bren LMG, the Cooper Carbine, the Well gun, the STG-44, and the PPSH. I kid you not, every gun on this list has zero recoil. Like I said, I personally started to take a backseat around this game because I just hated the Vanguard meta. Even though I owned the game, I had absolutely no desire to play it to level up the guns. The MP40, Owen gun, PPSH, and Well gun were some of the most broken SMGs we've ever seen in Warzone. They all had insane TTKs, and specifically the Owen gun held its own at mid-range with a 72-round magazine. Then you have the Cooper, STG, and Bren, which again dominated every other gun from Cold War and Modern Warfare 2019. If you weren't using any of the guns listed above during this time, you simply had no chance. I know a lot of sweaty Resurgence players love this state of the game, but I simply could not get into it. Now we'll take like spring of 2022 all the way up into the launch of Modern Warfare 2, which is honestly the same story as the last meta. Saw another Vanguard circle jerk of guns that included the Type 100, the NZ41, the Mark 05, H4 Blixen, and UGM8. Like I said, these were all meta and overpowered, but definitely not near as toxic as the meta before this. Somewhere in this window, Fortune's Keep was released, which I think Infinity Ward wanted to go away from SMGs for a little bit and enable them more like mid to long range guns to have some time in the spotlight. But around this time, like I said, this is about when I stopped playing the game or really caring, so I don't really have much to say about it other than this is when COD really started to go downhill. Which brings me to the launch of Warzone 2 in fall of 2022. The metas in Warzone 2 honestly only revolved around a couple of guns at a time. It never was like a super wide range. Like at launch we had the RPK, the Fennec, the TAC-V, and the TAC-56. There were seriously like no other guns you could use in this meta. While the RPK and Fennec were dominating everything and were very easy to use, the TAC-V I would argue was much better, but just required a little more precision to use. TAC-56 was also very user-friendly, and I think everyone just loves the iron sights on this. Of all the guns early this meta though, the Fennec was definitely the most broken. If you had any gun but the Fennec in a close range situation, you always died. Fast forward a couple months where we had Resurgence introduced to Warzone 2, where once again we had a very narrow window of good guns to choose. We had the RAL LMG, the Saiken LMG, the Hemlock AR, Vaznev SMG, and the Lockman Sub. You can say what you want about Warzone 2, but I honestly love just about every meta this game had to offer. The RAL was a textbook definition of this gun takes skill to use. You control the recoil and you're going to do well, but most players could not do that because of how much recoil it had. Then you had the Hemlock, which was a very good AR, but only supported a 45-round magazine max to balance it out. Then the Lockman Sub and Vaznev were both very fun to use, but even after nerfs still remained viable throughout Warzone 2's entirety. Now, I'm just going to cover the rest of the game's life cycle, which to me, honestly, we didn't really see anything too crazy in the meta besides like two really standout guns to me. Starting off with the Cronin Squall, yet another one of my favorite metas because it was a high recoil damage gun that I think rewarded good players. You paired that with the ISO SMG and you were unstoppable. After a nerf to that, we saw the Lockman 556, which people were calling the Grau 2.0 because of its zero recoil build. Once that was nerfed, we kind of entered this weird state of the game where you could really use anything, but I would say most people were using the Cast-Off 7.62, which was aka the AK-47. I really couldn't tell you exactly what the meta was from summer 22 all the way up until Warzone 3. So now that brings us to modern day where we're playing Warzone 3 on Urzikstan. And honestly, there's a lot of guns in the meta right now as we approach the Season 1 Reloaded update, which I'm sure is about to change. We're probably going to get some crazy nerfs here first, but these are the guns that we have right now. The MTZ Interceptor, Polymont LMG, BAS-B Battle Rifle, WSP Swarm, WSP-9, Striker, Ram 7, and the MTZ 762. With a lot to choose from right now, I think most would agree that the Interceptor, Polymont, and Swarm are at the forefront. The Interceptor has already seen a nerf, but it's still broken. I mean, all they really changed was that it can't 2-tap anymore. Instead, it's a 3-tap, which is still ridiculous. The Swarm shreds at close range, and the Polymont has an insane mobility and accuracy with the conversion kit. However, the other two SMGs offer a little bit more options at mid-range, which I think are better with the Interceptor. And you also have the BAS-B, which has also seen a nerf already, but this thing is also still ridiculous. Maybe not at long range, but at mid to close, this also makes a great pair for the Interceptor or the Cat AMR, which I would also go ahead and throw in the meta since it's the only sniper that will guarantee one shot to the head, even without explosive ammo. Just a few honorable mentions I'd like to go over with is the snake shots, which I kid you not were only in the game for like 48 hours. Honestly, really crazy how fast Infinity Ward got these out of the game. And similarly, the Lockwood 300 somehow through all the patches got reverted to the broken Warzone 2 state where the dual trigger has insane range and one taps also. But that is the entire Warzone meta history in one video. Like I said, I didn't cover everything, but I really just wanted to highlight those meta defining guns that were dominating the game at whatever time period it was. But let me know what your favorite meta was down below, or your least favorite. I know I'll probably put out a video of like my personal favorite and what the ones I hated the most as well. But if you liked, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already, and thank you for watching.